Chapter 18. The Trash Folder. They carried me like furniture, not roughly, not gently, with the precise mechanical indifference of a system transporting a component from one location to another. Jax's sentinel took my left side, Lena's took my right, and they lifted me, still frozen, still locked in the rigid cage of my own reversed frequency, and walked me through the tunnels with the synchronized stride of things that didn't need to breathe. I could see, I could hear, I could feel the sentinel's golden light on my skin, warm and wrong, like sunlight filtered through plastic. I could feel the air change as we moved upward through the syntax, the temperature dropping, the bioluminescence fading, the hum growing distant, but I couldn't move, couldn't twitch a finger, couldn't blink. My eyes stayed open, dry and burning, fixed on whatever happened to be in front of me, which was mostly the ceiling of increasingly unfamiliar tunnels scrolling past like the world's worst movie. The freezing code held my field in absolute stasis. The I am here, my warmth, my center, the refusal that powered everything, was still present. I could feel it, but it was locked behind glass, visible, untouchable, like seeing a fire through a window and not being able to reach the heat. Time passed. I couldn't track it without the pulse or Kale's mechanical clock, or even the basic ability to count seconds, because counting required a kind of internal rhythm, and the freezing code had flattened everything rhythmic in me into a single sustained frequency, a flatline. My personal soundtrack, made literal. We moved through tunnels I'd never seen, past junctions that didn't appear on any map I'd been shown, through sections of the syntax that felt older than the underground, older than the origin system servers, older than the petrified cables and the corrupted zones and the memory pools. The walls here weren't server towers or compressed hardware. They were something else, smooth, black, featureless, made of a material that didn't reflect light and didn't absorb it but seemed to exist in a state that was neither present but uninvolved, like a surface that had opted out of the physics of illumination. The golden light from the sentinels cast no shadows on these walls. That was wrong. That was deeply, fundamentally wrong, in a way that my frozen brain couldn't fully articulate. But my frozen body understood, at an animal level. We were leaving the syntax, not ascending toward the luster, not descending into the deep infrastructure, moving laterally, sideways through the architecture, into a layer that wasn't the syntax, and wasn't the luster, and wasn't anything I had a name for, a third space, a between space, the digital equivalent of the hallway between rooms, where the things that didn't belong anywhere were stored. The sentinel stopped. The tunnel ended, not at a wall, at a threshold, a vertical plane of absolute darkness that stretched from floor to ceiling, from wall to wall, perfectly flat, perfectly uniform. It looked like someone had sliced reality in half with a razor, and the other side of the cut was made of nothing. Jax's sentinel shifted its grip on my arm. Lena's adjusted its hold on my shoulder. "The pulse thanks you for your cooperation, Silas Thorne," Jax's construct said. Same easy voice, same golden confidence. You'll be held in secure stasis until the core operation can be facilitated. The process will be painless. Your contribution will save 10 million lives. And then they carried me through the threshold. The first thing I registered was the silence. Not the silence of empty tunnels or sweeper-cleared spaces, or the manufactured quiet of the pulse's ambient systems. This was structural silence, the silence of a place that had been specifically engineered to contain no sound, not even the hum. The hum that had been with me since the promenade, since the value board, since the first night I'd pressed my hand against glass and felt the vibration of a buried world. Gone. For the first time since my life began to change, the hum was absent. I was alone in the quiet, and the quiet was absolute. The second thing I registered was that I could move. The freezing code released the instant I crossed the threshold. Not gradually, not a slow thaw, not a returning warmth, all at once, like a hand opening. The field flooded back into my chest with a rush that felt like inhaling after being held underwater, and I gasped, my first voluntary sound in what felt like hours, and collapsed onto the ground. The ground. It was the same material as the walls of the tunnel outside. Black. Featureless. Neither reflective nor absorptive. My hands pressed against it, and felt nothing. Not cold, not warm, not hard, not soft. Just there. A surface that fulfilled the absolute minimum requirements of being a surface and invested no further effort. I pushed myself to my knees, then to my feet, swayed. The exhaustion of the freezing code hit me all at once. A full-body ache, like every cell had been held in a clenched fist and released simultaneously. My D-resolution field buzzed and crackled in my chest, reactivating in fits and starts, the warmth stuttering like an engine trying to turn over in the cold. I looked around. The space was, I struggled for the word, space was generous. It wasn't a room, it wasn't a cavern, it wasn't a tunnel, it was an expanse, flat, featureless, extending in every direction to a horizon that wasn't really a horizon because there was nothing to define it. No walls, no ceiling, no skyline, just the gradual dissolution of the black ground into a black distance that might have been 10 meters away, or 10 kilometers. The only light came from above, a diffuse, grey, sourceless illumination that cast no shadows and created no depth, flattening everything into a two-dimensional plane of monochrome nothing. It looked like the inside of an empty file folder, a directory with nothing in it, a place where data was sent to wait for permanent deletion. The trash folder. That's what it was. The Pulse's holding pen. The space between existence and non-existence, where things that had been flagged for removal but not yet processed sat in digital limbo. Not alive, not dead, just pending. And it was not empty. I saw the objects first, scattered across the black ground like debris after a storm. Fragments of things, recognizable in shape but stripped of context. A chair, a section of wall, a door, standing upright with nothing around it, its frame intact, its surface displaying the frozen ghost of a luster interface. A tree, a gene-edited tree from the promenade, its synchronized blossoms locked mid-bloom, their colour drained to grey. A fountain tipped on its side, silent, its musical programming visible as faint lines of code scrolling across its basin, like subtitles for a movie nobody was watching. Pieces of the luster, decommissioned objects, replaced components, the digital waste of a civilization that updated its furniture on a quarterly cycle and sent the old models here to wait for the garbage collection that might never come. And among the objects, between the dead fountains and the frozen trees and the doorways to nowhere, people, not many, a dozen maybe, scattered across the expanse at irregular intervals, each one isolated, each one still. They sat or stood or lay in postures that suggested not rest but suspension, the bodies of people who had been paused mid-existence and left to hang in the grey light like insects in amber. Most of them I didn't recognise. Adults, various ages, some in luster clothing, some in syntax layers, all of them with the same quality, a fading at the edges, a softness in the outline of their bodies as if the resolution of their existence was slowly dropping. Being unrendered one pixel at a time by the ambient degradation of a holding pen that was never designed for long-term storage. They were dissolving, all of them, slowly, patient. The trash folder wasn't killing them, it was forgetting them, letting them blur bit by bit until there wasn't enough definition left to constitute a person. I walked among them. My footsteps made no sound on the featureless ground. The grey light pressed down. Each person I passed was a monument to a life interrupted. Frozen faces, frozen hands, frozen mid-thought, mid-step, mid-breath. A woman in luster white, her mouth open in a word she'd never finish. A man in syntax layers, his hand reaching for something that wasn't there. A teenager, older than me, younger than Cale. curled on the ground with his arms wrapped around his knees, his edges so blurred that I could see the black ground through his elbows. I tried to touch one, the woman in luster white. My hand passed through her shoulder like smoke. She wasn't solid, wasn't physical. She was a render, a visual echo of a person whose data was still technically in the system, but whose processing priority had been reduced to zero. Like me, before the fall, a zero, present but unrendered. I kept walking. The expanse continued. More objects, more people. The grey light was unchanging. No brighter, no dimmer, no warmer, no cooler. The silence was total. My own breathing was the loudest sound in this world, and even that felt dampened, as if the space was slowly teaching my lungs. That volume was an extravagance it didn't support. Then I saw her. She was sitting on the ground, cross-legged, about 50 metres from where I'd entered the trash folder. Though distance was hard to judge in a place with no landmarks, she was surrounded by a ring of objects I recognised. Data shards, arranged in a circle, glowing faintly blue. The only colour in the grey expanse, the only light that wasn't the sourceless overhead flatness. Her white hair was shorter than I remembered, or maybe parts of it had faded, lost resolution, blurred away, taken by the trash folder's patient forgetting. Her heavy, woven clothes were intact but dimmer. The textures that had seemed so vivid in the atrium of Ridgeline Prep, the handmade quality, the mended and remended record of survival, were flatter now, less detailed, like a photograph losing focus from the edges inward. But her eyes were the same, pale grey, sharp, focused, and when they found me walking toward her across the featureless ground, they lit up with a recognition that cut through the grey like a blade through paper. "There you are," she said. Etta, the glitch lady. Alive, fragmented, fading. But here, I ran, I don't know why. Running was pointless. The ground was flat and featureless, and she wasn't going anywhere. But I ran anyway. The way you run toward a person you'd given up on seeing again. My footsteps were silent. My breathing was loud. The distance collapsed, and then I was standing at the edge of her data shard circle, looking down at a woman who'd been deleted in front of me, and somehow, impossibly, continued to exist. "You're alive," I said. "That's generous." She smiled. The same smile from the atrium, warm, then sharper, then sadder. But the smile was softer now, less defined. The corners of her mouth blurred slightly, as if the expression was costing her resolution she couldn't afford. "I'm pending. The drone that deleted me. The unrendering process where it's supposed to be complete, total. Zero residual data. But the process isn't perfect, never has been. There's always a fragment left, a ghost of a ghost." She gestured at herself, at the fading edges, at the data shards arranged in their protective circle. "I'm running on borrowed coherence. Those shards, I found them here scattered among the decommissioned junk. Dead data, compressed files, but there's enough residual energy in them to slow the degradation. Hold my resolution stable. Ish. For how long?" The smile again. The sad version. A question I try very hard not to calculate. I knelt outside the circle. Up close, the fragmentation was more visible. Her left hand was translucent. Her right arm, below the elbow, flickered intermittently, present 1 second, absent the next, like a signal dropping in and out of range. The heavy woven fabric of her coat was missing sections, replaced by patches of the grey, nothing that constituted the trash folder's default texture. She was a puzzle with pieces being slowly removed, and the picture was still recognisable, but getting harder to read. "The Sentinels brought me here," I said. "They had a freezing code. They locked my D-resolution field and carried me through the tunnels." "I know, I watched." She pointed upward. Not at the sourceless grey light, at a point in the air above her circle, where a faint shimmer hung. A residual data connection. A thread so thin it was nearly invisible, connecting the trash folder to the broader network, like a spider's silk connecting a shed to a house. The trash folder isn't completely isolated. It's a low-priority partition. The pulse barely monitors it. But data leaks both ways. I can see fragments of what happens in the network, blurry, delayed, like watching the world through a dirty window. She looked at me. I saw you fall. I saw you meet Kale. I saw you train with Adira. I saw you stand at the golden door and walk away. You've been watching me this whole time. What else is there to do in here? The furniture isn't conversational. She gestured at the dead fountain, the frozen tree, the doorway to nowhere. Then the lightness left her voice, and what replaced it was the same rough textured gravity I remembered from the atrium, the voice of a person who had important things to say and a limited window in which to say them. Silas, they brought you here for a reason. The trash folder is a holding space, but it's also an access point. The partition borders the core. Not physically, nothing is physical in here, but architecturally. The seed's code runs through the substrate beneath us. The pulse brought you here because, from this location, a forced reboot can be initiated without you ever reaching Adira's column. The ground beneath me, the featureless, textureless, silent black ground. I looked down at it with new understanding, not a floor, a membrane, a thin layer of nothing separating the trash folder from the deepest layer of the pulse's architecture. They're going to force the reboot, I said. They're going to try. The freezing code was step 1. Lock your field so you can't resist. This space is step 2. Isolate you from the syntax, from Kale, from Adira, from anyone who could help. Step 3 is reactivating the freezing code at a specific frequency that forces your de-resolution field into a single, all-encompassing pulse. Not directed, not surgical. A full radius, uncontrolled discharge that unwrites everything within range. And within range, from this location, is the entire evolved architecture of the pulse. The reboot. The reboot, except not on your terms, not the surgical layer-separated third option version Adira designed. The blunt version, the nuclear option, total wipe, syntax and all. 4,000 people, 4,312, as of the last census I was able to observe. Her voice was steady, the steadiness of someone who had already done the math and decided that the numbers would not be the thing that broke her. The pulse doesn't care about them. It cares about the dome, about the 10 million, about continuation, and you're the key it's been searching for since it realized it was dying. I sat on the ground, the membrane, the thin nothing between here and the end of the world. My de-resolution field had stabilized. The warmth was back. The I am here humming in my chest, freed from the freezing code's grip by whatever property of the trash folder had released it when I crossed the threshold. Maybe the holding space wasn't compatible with the freezing frequency. Maybe the partition's isolation had disrupted the signal. Maybe the pulse had wanted my field active, needed it active for the forced reboot. How long before they initiate step 3? I asked. I don't know. The data fragments I can see are delayed and incomplete. Hours, maybe less. Hours, maybe less. And outside this grey nothing, out in the real syntax, in the tunnels and the cities and the underground, Kale and Vex and Adira and Maran and 4,000 people had no idea where I was. The sentinels had taken me through tunnels that didn't appear on any null map. The trash folder was a partition the resistance didn't even know existed. I was invisible again. Not in the old, passive way. In the worst possible way. Hidden inside the machine. Stored in a directory nobody could access. Waiting to be used as a weapon against the people I was supposed to save. The data shards, I said. I looked at the blue glowing ring around Etta. You said they have residual energy. Enough to slow your degradation. Barely. They're dead data, compressed files. The energy is minimal, enough to hold my coherence for a few more days, maybe a week. Not enough to do anything useful. She paused. Read my face. The grey eyes, sharp, focused, the eyes that had looked at me in the atrium and said, "There you are," when no one else could. Narrowed. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that the trash folder is full of dead data, decommissioned objects, fragments of the luster's discarded infrastructure, and I'm thinking that my deresolution field unwrites digital objects. I looked at the scattered debris of the holding pen, the chairs, the walls, the trees, the fountains, the doorways, the digital waste of a civilization that threw things away without destroying them completely. What happens if, instead of unwriting the data, I unwrite the compression, decompress the dead files, release the residual energy that's locked inside them? Etta stared at me, the fragmented woman with the fading edges and the borrowed coherence. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not what deresolution does, she said. Deresolution dissolves code. It unwrites, it reduces, it takes things apart. What you're describing is something new, something the pulse has no model for. I held up my hands, the hands that had broken a corrupted data trap through sheer will, the hands that had made a dead piece of adaptive flooring turn green, the hands that shook when they remembered the kiosk and the value board and the flatline hum of a fountain playing for an audience of one. Adira told me to trust the field. Kale told me to be the regulator. Vex told me to stop projecting. And you, I looked at her, the first person who had ever looked at me and said my name like it meant something. You told me to come to where the light stutters. Every piece of advice I've gotten since this started has pointed at the same thing. The field isn't just destruction, it's interaction. It touches code, it reads code, it feels the difference between a harvesting thread and a power conduit. And if it can feel the difference, it can choose, not just what to unwrite, but what to release. The data shards pulsed in their circle, blue, warm, alive in the way that compressed things are alive, dormant, contained, waiting for someone to open the jar. The pulse brought me here because this space borders the core, I said. It wanted to use me as a bomb, but a bomb is just energy without direction, and I am very, very good at being directed by things I feel sorry for. I reached for the nearest data shard, not with my hand, with the field, the warmth, the I am here. I touched the shard's compressed structure, the way I'd touched the adaptive flooring in the training chamber, not to unwrite it, but to recognize it, to feel what it was, what it had been, what it contained. The shard was old, decades old, a compressed fragment of someone's personal archive, photographs, messages, a birthday video, a child's drawing of a house with a sun that was too big and a family that was too small. All of it compressed into a crystal the size of a fist, squeezed down to almost nothing by a system that didn't want to fully destroy data it might need for engagement, analytics, but didn't want to allocate the resources to keep it accessible. I felt it all, the weight of a life, compressed into a pebble, and I pushed, not outward, not destructively, inward, into the compression itself, into the algorithm that held the data in its tight, cold fist. I found the compression code, a simple, elegant structure, the kind of thing the Pulse used 1 trillion times a day to manage its infinite archive. And I didn't unwrite it. I unlocked it, the shard decompressed, not explosively, not all at once. The crystal structure bloomed, expanded, opened, released its contents in a cascade of light and data and residual energy that filled the air around Etta's circle like a cloud of luminous pollen. The photographs appeared as shimmering frames, a woman laughing, a child on a swing, a sunset that might have been real or might have been the Pulse's LED dome at its most convincing. The messages scrolled past in glowing text too fast to read. The birthday video played in a brief, beautiful burst, a voice singing happy birthday, off-key, full of love, surrounded by the warm blur of a celebration that had happened once and been compressed into a pebble and dropped in a junkyard and forgotten. The energy released by the decompression rippled outward, warm, substantial, not the faint borrowed coherence of a dead shard. Something stronger, something alive. The unlocked vitality of data returned to its original state after decades of confinement. And Etta, fragmented, fading, pending deletion Etta, gasped. Her edges sharpened. Her left hand solidified. Her right arm stopped flickering. The patches of grey nothing in her coat filled in. Not fully, not completely, but enough. Enough for her outline to go from blurring to defined. Enough for her grey eyes to brighten from dull steel to the sharp living silver I remembered from the atrium. Silas, she breathed. Her voice was stronger, fuller. The rough texture was back. The mended, carried, survived quality of a woman who'd spent decades in the hard places of the world and had the voice to prove it. What did you just do? I looked at my hands. No static, no flicker, just warmth. The de-resolution field humming in my chest, and beneath it, threaded through it, growing from it like a vine from a root, the new frequency. The third one. The one that wasn't unwriting and wasn't rewriting, but something in between. Something that opened. I don't know, I said, but there are a lot more shards in here. I looked out at the trash folder, the grey expanse, the scattered debris of a civilization's discarded data. The frozen people, fading at the edges, running out of resolution in a holding pen that nobody visited and nobody maintained and nobody cared about. A dozen people, hundreds of decommissioned objects, thousands of compressed data shards, each one containing a fragment of someone's life, a memory, a message, a moment, locked away by a system that was too efficient to destroy and too indifferent to preserve. The pulse had brought me to a junkyard and expected me to be a bomb. It had made a critical miscalculation. It had brought a boy who felt sorry for broken floors and heard heartbeats in paper envelopes into a room full of forgotten things. And it had given him the key to open them. I reached for the next shard, and the trash folder began, slowly, impossibly, stubbornly, to light up.